Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Protecting Office 365, Adding Defense in Depth to Your Office 365 Deployment. I'm Sarah Duffy, Marketing Manager here at Barracuda MSP, and I'm happy to be moderating today's session. Today, I'm joined by Mike Parkin, Technical Marketing Engineer at Barracuda. He will be going into details on how you can protect Office 365 from ransomware and other email-borne threats. Before I pass it over to Mike, I want to go over some brief housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the questions panel to the right of the GoToWebinar screen. We will be answering all your questions at the end, so feel free to submit them along the way. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. Please take a moment to tell us what you think, as we are continuously improving the content and quality of our online events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mike. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. I'd say good morning or afternoon, depending on where in the country you are. I'm Mike Parkin. I'm a technical marketing engineer here at Barracuda. Just as a moment's background, I'm a former security operations engineer. I've been in product development and I'm a technical marketing engineer now. And I also spent a bit of time as a penetration tester. I used to break into banks. So I know both the good side and the bad side of doing email security and security in general. And what we're going to do here today, we're going to walk through a bit on Office 365, what it provides, what Microsoft provides by default as some of the basic protections they give you. And we're going to go over, the reason for moving to the cloud, and then why ultimately it's not enough. You need to actually have some extra layers of defense to make yourself fully defended. So as far as questions, I generally take them at the end. If there's something that's very, very pertinent, very time sentenced on a specific stage where I am, if I catch it on screen, I will try to answer it at the time. Otherwise, I may end up holding it to the end. So if it's the perfect question, I may interrupt for it. But I will definitely answer all of your questions at the end. So let's get started here. So as all of you know, I'm sure, Microsoft Office 365 is a huge factor. I was introduced in 2011, and they really are kind of the 800-pound gorilla of the software as a service Office suite capability, email, word processing, spreadsheets, etc. It's all there. It's Microsoft Office that we all know and use. And many of you are either already on Office 365 now or are looking to, go ahead, go forward. And if you're working, of course, with our friends on the other side of the aisle here, Barracuda MSP, you're going to be, can work with us, and you can even help you make that migration. But the question is, why are people going to Office 365? What is the compelling reason that people are doing it? And the answers are multiple. 365 is very cost effective. The fact is, you don't need to maintain iron on in your environment for Exchange Online. You've got everything sitting there. It's out in the cloud where it's easy to work with, and the fact that you don't actually have to do any work with it. There's cross-platform capability built in with the Office 365 apps, so you can use Word, you can use PowerPoint, you can use Excel, you can use Outlook. All of these things are available online. Also available as desktop installs for PC and Windows, and in some cases, some of them are available for Android as well. So no matter what platform you're on, you can continue to use it. In fact, even if you're an old school like me and have a BSD box or a Linux box, the browser-based stuff, the web-based stuff, you can actually use a Linux. You can use Chrome and Linux and be able to access Word online. It's eminently scalable. It goes from a single user installation. I actually do my own local testing here at Barracuda. I actually have a single user install. I have a domain I own that goes to Office 365, but it scales up to hundreds of thousands. Microsoft did a presentation just recently at their event in Orlando, where they had a couple folks from General Electric were there, and GE has like 200,000 people moving to 300,000 on Office 365. Just tremendous amount of scale they have. And then you have the ability to manage everything in one place. So they've got, you've got the management interface that lets you manage everything relatively easily. And they've really done a world-class job of securing their infrastructure. What's behind Office 365 Azure is really, really well defended. I was pen tester for the Federal Reserve, so I've been to Federal Reserve sites around the country, including the largest cash vault in the world. And Microsoft, you ever watch any of their videos on how they secure their sites at a level of security that rivals the Federal Reserve. It's really impressive. The only difference is that Microsoft doesn't have guys with guns. But there are, multiple layers of defense, process stuff to keep your data safe. They do a fantastic job of keeping the infrastructure safe. But what are they actually doing to protect you, protecting you and your email? So they've got two separate pieces to that are protecting you. They've got Exchange Online Protection, EOP, which is included in every level of Office 365, and then their Advanced Threat Protection capability. And these are both included. They're available and for Office 365 with EOP being included in every one. So EOP is your basic. It covers spam filtering, basic AV, basic anti-malware. It uses a slight variant of the engine they use for Windows Defender, which anybody who's using a Windows workstation since Windows came out, I think, early in XP or late XP, and was common in Windows 7. Uses the Windows Defender stuff, so it's pretty effective. It's not top of the line, but it's actually pretty effective. And then for the next step up, they've got ATP, and ATP is an additional cost subscription. Right now, it costs a couple bucks per user per month, and adds 0-day protection. So attacks that have never been seen before in the wild, it actually provides some defense against those. Protection against other types of advanced threats that EOP would miss, and adds a layer of link protection. So if you're going to a website that may have some malicious code on it, is a spam site, is a fake bank login site, which would be like from a spear phishing attack, it has protection against that. So these features are all really cool. They're an added cost unless you're getting their top tier E5. So if you're full blown E5 shop, then ATP is included. So it would seem between EOP and ATP, they provide all the pieces you need, or do they? They do offer some really powerful tools, and I'm first to admit that. But there are actually some challenges that they miss, and let me elaborate on that a little bit. So the question is, you'd think they've got everything. Why would you actually want to go for it? And it's obviously a good question. So what we're missing is defense in depth. Now, anyone who will talk to you about security as a security professional is going to tell you to add defense in depth. You can't just rely on one piece. You can't just rely on the firewall. You can't just rely on a spam filter. You can't just rely on one piece to keep you safe from everything. I was in security operations for years as a pen tester, and as a pen tester, I've seen cases where I could break in to a box, but I couldn't leverage any further from that box because there were layers of defense beyond just the defenses on the system. And security operations, the same thing. Having those defenses in place meant that if I had something go bad in my environment, I could actually contain it. Another thing that is useful is going from different vendors, right? We all have our strengths and weaknesses. Mostly strengths these days. Actually, most of the vendors are actually pretty strong, but there are some things each of us do better than others. They specialize in the way they do things. And by working with more than one vendor, you get to leverage the strengths of each, which compensate for any weaknesses you might find in another vendor's kit. And as the attacks become more sophisticated, we've already seen this. They start avoiding certain techniques that their primary target is using to defense. The defenses they expect to encounter, the defense they test against. And by using multiple vendors, you get the advantage of the attacker may not have been able to test against everything, and there's the synergy of the different things. A good example of this is malware that's designed to detect if it's running in a sandbox. Sandboxing has been around for quite some time. FireEye started it off. They were the first vendor to actually do it. And because of FireEye and other vendors who've gone into that security space of sandboxing, which we're in as well, one of the things that a malware can do is look to see, am I running in a sandbox? And if I'm running in a sandbox, I run differently. I don't do the same kind of attack profile that I would do if I was running in a real world. So it makes the sandbox a little bit more difficult for the sandbox attack. Now, there's more to it than that. There's more depth to it, and you can actually tell that they're looking for sandbox. That becomes a behavior. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But by using different techniques, you actually get to leverage all that capability. Are we actually missing any challenges here? Right, without even considering the concepts of defense and depth, are there any security challenges that you might deal with when you're working with Office 365? One of the things that I've found myself working with it is their UI is very comprehensive, but it's also very complex. If you're looking for security functionality, it can be very difficult to find what you're actually looking for, and sometimes complicated to get to it. It's well documented, but at the same time, it's 5 clicks deep to get where you want to go. Basic management is very easy. The complex security management becomes much more difficult. For email protection, Microsoft does an okay job with spam. All of us in this industry are into the 98, 99, 99 plus category for spam protection. It's a matter of how many nines after the 99, after the decimal point. But Microsoft has historically not been the best when it comes to spam filtering. And if any of you looked in your junk mail filter, and the thing is, there it is, it gets to your junk mail filter, which means it's actually on the server. It's actually getting in, it's using your resources, it's using your storage, it's using your network bandwidth. The processing time for the advanced threats, if you have their ATP functionality, the processing time can actually take a while, because when they have an identified file, they run it against their whole stack. And that can take anywhere from, on a good day with light load, can be 5 to 6 minutes. On a heavy load day, it can be 30 minutes. And they do have a dynamic delivery which says, there's a file attached to this email, and we are processing it. We'll let you know. It'll be accessible when it's done. But you got to wait 30 minutes for a file. That can be kind of a challenge. One of the difficulties when dealing with Microsoft's ATP. And one of the final points, and probably one of the most interesting technically, is that Microsoft is the 800-pound gorilla of the field, right? They are still the largest deployed base of desktop operating systems in the world. Linux being a far third, BSD being probably 5th or 6th, and then Apple being second to different Mac OSs. So anybody is going to writing malware, the chances are they're writing it for Windows. And every single Windows system has Windows Defender on it. And Windows Defender is the basis for EOP, and is a base component of ATP, and then they have their own ATP capabilities. So they're the people I'm going to go against, right? If I'm testing my malware, you can guarantee they're throwing it at desktop Windows, they're throwing it at Microsoft's Exchange Online and Microsoft's EOP and ATP to see, one, if it's getting through the spam filters, right? If I'm doing a targeted attack, I want to make sure I can make the spam filters. And at the same time, I want to make sure I can get past the defenses. So that is one of the disadvantages to relying on Microsoft for your defenses, because they're the one everybody's testing against. They're the baseline that the attackers are going against. And some of the things we haven't even talked about yet is with defense and defense in depth is having offsite backups in case there's a breach, because nobody's 100%, not even us. Anybody who claims that they are 100% effective all the time against everything, they are lying to you. And journal archives. Now, journal archives usually not thought of as part of security, but on a lot of levels they are, because they're where you have compliance requirements. If you're, medical or legal or banking, financial services, you actually have legal requirements to archive your email. And that's actually a challenge with Microsoft. So what we've found so far is that, there are actually more to it than meets the eye. There are some missing pieces. There's more to Office 365 security. And the obvious pieces, the stuff that Microsoft gives you to work with, may not be enough for what you need to do. So what pieces are actually missing? So Barracuda, we take a 3-step approach to security. First step being detect. And I'm not necessarily talking about detection in the concept of intrusion detection, where there's a bad guy on my network. This is more of a looking for latent threats that let you find what may have already gotten in. I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes. Prevention. This is where you're really adding your defenses in depth. This is stopping the bad guy as they're actually making their attack or trying to make their attack, stop them before they can get in. And then finally recover, which is where, you have to assume something is going to get in, even if it didn't come in through email or the network. We've heard stories about it, and I will state for a fact that they work. I've used the techniques myself, where you leave a thumb drive in the parking lot, or leave a thumb drive on a desk, or you leave a CD-ROM or a DVD that has written, CEO's annual financial report recorded at wherever the location actually gave it was, and then the date, and you leave it in a restroom. And chances are somebody's going to go, oh, cool, I missed that. Neat, I will watch it. And it's may actually be a real recording, but it's also got some malware on it. And when you run it, it infects you. Don't ask me how I know that works. So, and then of course, email archiving lets you get things back if you need to. So archiving is could be counted in the recovery part as well. It's kind of a parallel path. So assuming you got to assume something is going to get in, and you're going to lose data. You may lose it to ransomware. You may lose it to a malicious user. You have a user who's decided that they no longer want to be an employee, and they break things on the way out. Or you have someone who accidentally hits the delete button on a file they really wanted to keep. I did desktop support early in my career, and I had that happen more than once. So backup, which is one of the tools we give you. So Barracuda, we're uniquely positioned to complete the security picture for Office 365. We are built around that. The entire Essentials portfolio is built around protecting Office 365 and giving the same capabilities to other platforms. If you're using, G Suite, you're really old school and you're running SendMail or Postfix server on a BSD or Linux box somewhere in a corner, we have the ability to do that. And if you're using Exchange, physical server, we can work with you there. So Barracuda, if we fill in all the gaps, right? And I'm going to now start covering all of the different components here. So for detection, we offer several tools that let you find latent threats that may already exist in your environment, emails that have gotten through, things that have gotten through. We have the Exchange Threat Scanner for Office 365. The logo here is the Exchange Threat Scanner of the Office 365. I call the email threat scanner. We have 2 versions of this. I don't think I have a slide on the other one. Oh, wait, yeah, I do. That goes and does, it's web-based, so you go to the cloud and it will scan your stuff and actually let you see what may already exist in the environment. It's cloud-based, it's free to run, it's a discovery tool. Talk to our friends over on the other side of the house at Barracuda MSP, and they will be happy to work with you and set you up for a scan. So let me give you a moment's look at what that would look like if you ran the scan. So when it first comes up, it would give you, when the scan completed, it would give you the security score, and then let you dive in and look at different emails and what threats it's found, which is actually pretty cool. It lets you see what may have already gotten in. And I won't guarantee it, but I will say I suspect there's a very high likelihood that any of you who are listening, that if you were to run the scanner, you would find, if you're already on Office 365, you would find a few threats that are already in your environment. The next stage is the Exchange Threat Scanner, ETS for Exchange, that does basically the same thing. Okay, this does it for existing threats that may actually be on your Exchange system. So if you have an on-premise server, you've got a chassis in the room in the data center that's actually handling your email, or you're running it virtualized, which Azure or AWS, you can actually have your email up there. This actually lets you scan existing Exchange servers. This actually runs in a local host, so it's not cloud-based entirely. It does leverage our advanced threat protection capabilities, which is cloud-based, but the actual system itself is a small download. You download it onto your system, and you'll now run it using the built-in Outlook 2013 or 2016 that's on that desktop, and then you can scan whatever mailboxes that particular account that you're using has access to, which profile you're using. Again, pretty cool. On the prevention side, okay, this is where the meat of Essentials lives. So Essentials Barracuda, we got our start in being spam filtering. It is what we do. That's where we got our start originally. It migrated from the spam firewall to the email security gateway, to, in parallel now, the email security service, which is the first component of Barracuda Essentials. So it provides really world-class spam filtering. We also provide anti-phishing protection. So you're looking at phishing emails. We have what's known as intent analysis, in which we look at the email and we're able to kind of figure out what it's about, whether it came from a bad source, et cetera, and we're able to actually block emails or quarantine emails that may be phishing emails. And then we add link protection on top of that. And link protection rewrites links that are found in email. One of the common techniques that attackers will use now, rather than having a download attachment that is the malware payload, they'll send you to a link to a malicious site. And the malicious site may be anything from a fake copy of a login of a bank, or Amazon, or another web business site. Or it may be what would be considered a drive-by, in which you go to the site and it leverages something running in the web browser, either a browser exploit or has you download something, and you end up with an attack coming from there. And Link Protect is a pretty cool feature. It's actually available across a broad range of the Barracuda portfolio. So this is what it would actually look like. You'd get an email with a link in the email. You click on the link. It was a bad link in this case. It popped up a warning, and then gives you the ability to go and get a training video on what we were blocking on, which is really cool. That actually turns your user base from being part of the attack surface, the target an attacker is going to go for, that's what the emails are all about, into actually being part of the defense. And I can tell you from pen testing, that we would find a hole in the firewall, you find a hole in an application, it was generally a lot easier to bait a user with some kind of email that we would phish them, or we'd get an attachment, convince them to open, or something like that. The users were the weak link. And people, we're human, we make mistakes, and that's actually what a lot of attackers are going to rely on, is users making mistakes. So we've got AV capability built in. So if there's actually malicious attachments, every version of Essentials has the ability to do antivirus, anti-malware capability that, again, is going to stop the majority of attacks, things that if we've seen it before, we can identify it as such, we can stop it without needing any of the advanced capability. That's something that's part of the basic capability. But for the advanced capability, we have advanced threat protection. ATP is an ability that is designed to stop the zero-day threats, to take the stuff that we've never seen before, no one has ever seen before in the wild, and actually be able to identify it as hostile and stop it from getting into your system. And for this, we actually take a multi-layered approach. We have fingerprinting, obviously, reputation database, and all that stuff. But going on top of that, we actually have multiple layers. We have a pre-filter layer that will look and say, hey, this may be benign. We can actually do a really good job of identifying benign files, say a Word document that has no macros, right? We can't, there's nothing in it that could actually be an attack. We can identify it as being safe, and, filter it out. We then jump into a heuristic analysis in which we're doing both static, what function calls are being used, looking at an analysis of file entropy, etc., embedded links, things like that in the code. But we're also looking at how the program is designed to behave. We look at what it's supposed to be doing when it would actually run in an environment that is a live environment. And this is a very fast process, takes under seconds to under a minute normally, and gets the majority of the malicious files that are found in our ATP are actually found at this layer, at the heuristic and static analysis layer. And then finally, once we jump past that, we get to a CPU emulated sandbox. I talked about sandboxing a little bit earlier. Sandboxing historically was done on virtual machines. Attackers can program their code to make it look to see if it's a virtual machine and then go from there. And of course, the virtual machines can say, hey, you've identified that you're seeing if you're on a virtual machine, so I can see that as a bad behavior, and I can react to it. What a CPU emulated sandbox does is a CPU emulation responds as if it was real iron. So when an attacker or when the code does its query to see, am I running in a virtual machine? Basically, the system comes back and goes, no, you're running on, you're a Core i5, you're this, you're that, this is the environment I'm in. Look, there's mouse clicks, there's somebody typing. It looks like a real active system. It's a different approach to sandboxing, and I could probably do a 2-hour session just on the different merits, the different kinds of sandboxing. I've been actually working in that field for quite some time now. So it's pretty cool. That's the final stage, and that actually gets the last of the ones that may have slipped past the heuristic analysis when we actually see it in action. One of the things that's cool about this is we do a lot of machine learning going on in the background here. And for those who don't know, I know machine learning is, people have heard about it, it's been a buzzword for a while. But what machine learning does is it takes a bunch of good stuff and a bunch of bad stuff and understands parameters about whatever the thing is. And this goes in language, it goes in software, it goes in a whole bunch of different places. So the concept is the same. So what I do is I look at the, 5, 6, 7, 800 different little factors that I'm looking at, and I throw a million good files at it and identify what all of the different things are. And I then go from there to throwing a million bad things at it and see what the same factors look like in a piece of bad code. And that kind of builds my machine learning. And I throw a file I've never seen before at it. And with a file that I've never seen before, I look at it and I go, okay, what does this actually look? Do you look more like a real one? Do you look more like a bad one? And I can go from there. So we've got that coming in from a whole bunch of different places. We get it from email security. We get it from our web security gateways beyond just the email security capability. We feed it from our next generation firewalls as well. So we've got all these different kinds of data coming in to feed the machine learning. I got a little bit of an infographic here. So we're looking at the different threat vectors, network, email, web, mobile users who are using any of your web security gateway or web security service, which lets in the mobile users, and application level, which we get from our web application firewall. All of the different services are feeding into that, and that feeds a vast majority of files come in to the machine learning from all these different places. We've got a high volume and a broad range of information. Plus, we've got honeypots that attackers are going to go get so we can identify the attacks they're using. We've got web crawlers that are looking for different kinds of malicious things out on the internet. We've got about 250,000 deployments out there, so we've got a huge, huge base coming in. We actually have customers who will send files to us. And then Barracuda Labs, which is in South San Jose, and a team whose entire reason to exist is to identify these kind of things. So the next piece of the puzzle is backup. And backup is here to let you recover your files. Now, the reality is that your chances of actually losing files from a hardware failure, Microsoft blowing up, dropping a drive, is very, very slim. And we know that. The real reason for having backup capability like this is so in case there's a problem where you have someone who has maliciously deleted a file, or you have files that have been otherwise destroyed, accidentally maliciously deleted, and that lets you recover them from there. Gives you redundancy that you don't have. I don't have otherwise. Very simple user base to interface to be able to get to the data, to look for it, search through it, see what needs to be restored. You can restore it back to wherever it came from, or you can restore it to an arbitrary location if you need to. So it gives you the ability to say you've had a user who's left and their PC has been destroyed for whatever, their OneDrive has been deleted. You actually can still get those files back. And the final piece of this is the Cloud Archive service. Cloud Archive service gives you a journaled immutable archive. And this is really primarily for compliance. So if you're in an industry where compliance is a major thing you need to worry about, this is the tool you need. This lets you journal all of the communications in and out in a way that the users can search it. They can actually look to find data that they may have, our old emails, things like that, a very effective search capability. And they recover things, but they can't touch it. They can't actually damage anything. So it's a pretty cool capability there. So to sum it all up, Microsoft gives you a lot of good reasons to move your organization to Office 365, including all the basic security systems. But it may not be enough. You may want to get more, and that's where Barracuda comes in to fill in the different holes in the security. So we do email security, including advanced threat protection, offsite backups to restore data in case of malicious or accidental deletion, and then a cloud archive for legal or regulatory compliance issues if you're in an industry that that's something that matters to you. So for more information, Sarah, unfortunately, I don't have the Barracuda MSP link on this slide deck, and I'm sorry. You can give it to our guest as soon as I'm done here. But www.barracuda.com, products essentials, will take you and show you everything about essentials. There's a demo if you want to see it in action, and if you want to run the threat scan, you can actually go ahead and run the threat scan. And if you want to work with, our MSP side, they will be more than happy and more than able to help you out here. So thank you for watching. Before I go any further, let me take a quick look at the questions. If I can get it to actually scroll for me the way I need it to. Let's see. Asking about heuristics. My interface